the Canadian Chamber of Commerce warning that Trump's trade war will impact communities across the states. More than 60% of products the U.S. imports from Canada are goods used for American manufacturing, like steel and oil. San Antonio, Detroit, and Kansas City are the most dependent on Canadian imports and will likely be hit the hardest once April 2nd comes around. Research also finding that most of the hardest hit cities are in states that Trump won in November. For more on how these tariffs will hit American businesses, Candace Laing, also the president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and Andrew DiCapua, the principal economist at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Great to have you both. Candace, let's start with you because you released this research about which U.S. cities will be the most impacted. Tell me what you discovered.
Well, thanks, Karen. Thanks for having us. I think rightly so. We've been very focused on how tariffs are really just a tax and make everything more expensive for Americans. And we've been really diligent at getting the data into the hands of everybody we can from our Canada-US trade tracker. But I think in addition to the tariffs that are applied to what is imported into the US, we also have to reverse the direction of travel on our trade and look at how export dependent that many states and in fact cities are. And with the onset of, potentially more tariffs this week and the trade war we're into now, those exports to Canada were the biggest customer of 34 states and so many cities in the US that they are export dependent, and that puts so many American jobs at risk, in addition to things becoming already more expensive with US tariffs.
Let me follow up then regarding that point with you, Andrew. Why are certain states more dependent on Canada than others? And what kind of impact will people in those specific cities feel?
Well, what we're really trying to do is bring the conversation actually from the state level down to the community level. So those cities that are higher on our export dependence list are usually cities that are trading in advanced manufacturing goods, right? So these are supply chains that are, in aerospace, autos, highly integrated manufacturing networks that are placed in both Canada and in the United States. And so, in the case of autos, we always hear that auto parts cross the Canada, US, Mexico border up to 8 times before final assembly. So these are highly integrated supply chains, and you can see that the cities that are higher on our list are involved in that type of trade. I would note that the United States does have a manufacturing surplus when it comes to trade with Canada. And so, as Candace mentioned, a lot of what we send down the United States are intermediate goods that American businesses then use to produce, to sell to themselves, and to sell around the world.
So, Candace, this will likely cause massive trade disruption on both sides, right? So how are you working with the U.S. to try to limit the economic disruption?
Well, we have been down in DC. We have a lot of business to business relationships, but bringing the data and the facts of our trade relationship, the true nature of that trade relationship, has just been something we have been working so hard at, because what we believe to be true is that the full integration of our economies, the important integration of our supply chains, it's so important to fully comprehend that, because in addition to the costs related to households, by things getting more expensive, potential job losses on both sides of the border, you have at risk the reliability, security of supply chains that have been decades and decades of effort going into that. And as Andrew mentioned, there are so many raw materials that go back and forth that support for America, technology and defense systems, that we're actually putting all of that at risk at this moment with this trade and tariff war.
We're going to follow it closely. Candace, Andrew, thank you both. Hope we can have you back.